Hey guys, welcome back to Andertons TV, and today I am joined by my good friend Ian Robinson from Blackstar Amplification and his new bevy of toys, which are the new range of Silverline amplifiers from Blackstar in October 2019.
Yes.
I had to think where we were then.
Yes.
It's good to see you again, man.
Cheers, pal. Thank you very much.
You may remember seeing Ian in a really informative series of videos that we did last year up at Blackstar HQ, where we myth-busted all kinds of common misconceptions about digital amps and solid-state amps and valve amplifiers and how different valves do or don't change the tone and stuff. So again, I'll put links in the description below, but that's a handy video to watch. But Silverline, I know nothing about this range other than it's replacing the long-standing TVP range, True Valve Power. Can you give us a bit of a sort of an overview of what are you trying to achieve with these amps?
No, absolutely. Got a range of combos, one head and a 2x12 cab.
Yep.
And really what we're looking to do is we've got a very high performance digital platform, which it uses sharp processors, which are the kind of stuff that you find in those high-end sort of modelers and stuff like that. But what we wanted to do is take all that technology and flexibility, performance, and put it into something that was much more accessible for guitar players, general guitar players, a bit like you and I perhaps, who maybe get a little bit frightened of menus and stuff like that. So the technology under the hood is that kind of level. Maybe we have a different approach to the way that we do stuff, but it's in a really easy to use, very guitarist friendly product that you'd be happy to stand on stage in front of and think, this looks cool, I look cool, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just trying to get the marriage between the high tech and the sort of easy to use guitar stuff,
which is essential. I think, you know, that's the number one problem that I have, is breaking through that kind of sense that I'm not playing through like a normal proper guitar.
Yeah.
Now, I think most people would be quite comfortable with this idea that, you know, valve amplifiers operate in that kind of upper mid premium price bracket.
Yeah.
And solid state, and more recently, you know, what we might call digital modeling amplifiers, operate at the sort of the more affordable end.
Yeah.
But there is this grey area, isn't there, that I'm sort of, I think your True Valve Power range was quite pioneering in the sort of this going, well, okay, there is a bit in the middle where you could buy a really well-spec'd sort of digital modeling or solid state amplifier, or you could buy a cheap valve amplifier or a more affordable valve amplifier.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest with you, it feels like historically Valve has won that battle. You know, people will still go, I'd rather have the cheap 20-watt valve amplifier than the 100-watt all singing, all dancing. But it kind of feels like there's a momentum shift driven a little bit by perhaps the success of True Valve Power, but also, you know, brands like Boss doing their higher spec Katana, Fender with the new Tone Master. So there's a bit of me that goes, why do you think that customers even want higher performance solid state, you know, as opposed to just a cheap valve amp? You know, what's the argument?
Well, mate, first of all, something we've said all along when we speak to you, you'd expect us to say this as Blackstar, as a company that makes valve amps and DSP based amps, that the technology is not necessarily that important in a way to us. We're designing products that are for kind of a need or a use case. And to tell you the truth, I think it's part of our sort of heretic approach that we really don't believe that a valve product is necessarily better than a digital product or vice versa. That you can do most things in most technologies. It's just that to do what a DSP-based amp does with valves, you'd need an amp as big as this room as opposed to something this big, because DSP gives you so much flexibility in terms of, you know, the amount of computing power now on one of these sharp processors. It's absolutely huge. And so what it allows you to do is, with the correct understanding, because it's one thing having all this power, but it's what you do with it. And I suppose there's two sides to that. One is what you do from a sound point of view and technically. So understanding, the big thing for us from the beginning was understanding how the valve amps worked, and then transferring that understanding into the digital domain, and leaving behind the bit that weren't important and didn't really make a big difference, but then the bits that were important, improving them. And as I probably said to you before, there's some stuff you do digitally that you can't do in valve. So say the way that a valve clips is generally governed by physical laws, you know, like Child's law or some other thermionic law, which in those old physics books that I showed you last time. But on the digital side, you can reproduce that because it's a mathematical law, but you can also change that mathematical law. So the stuff you can do digitally, that's just one example that you just can't do in valve stuff. So, one hand, the way we approach these is very much from a designing an amp point of view. It's not modelling another amp, it's designing an amp that does different stuff because we want to give people a different sound. And on the other hand, you have all this power. How do you make it usable and something that you want to go back to time and time again and inspires you? So you don't spend all your time playing with menus and getting your patches set up. You just walk up to the amp, you get the sound you want, but the 4, 5, 6 sounds that you need for a gig, very simple to program, and then it's all back into your fingers and the feel and everything. And that's what we spent our time concentrating on.
We're going to invite one of Blackstar's technical boffins, I think that's what it says on his business card, to explain some of the more digital wizardry in here. But I do just want to go back to a couple of the misconceptions from our Mythbuster videos that kind of freaked me out a bit. So, are these Class D power sections or Class AB power sections?
These are Class D.
These are Class D.
Yeah.
Now, the D in Class D, I always thought stood for digital. There was some sort of special digital, but that's not.
No,
the case,
it's to do with the amount how the
so it's just a very efficient. It's a very efficient.
So the switching power amps, effectively switching power amps.
And the digital part of the processing is just about how does the tone and that amp react as you put different loads on it.
So the big thing we have on these products, the response control, which is based on TVP, on our True Valve Power thing. And we have a patent on this, and there's various products that have a similar control, this response control, where you can select your valve type. Basically, what we do is different to what anybody else does because we have this patent. And basically, the way that a valve amp reacts with the speaker and the output transformer allows it to introduce or to deliver different power levels at different frequencies. So at resonance, where you get the rumble, and at presence, where you get that top end, it actually delivers a different amount of power.
Right.
So a different amount of volts across the load, which is changing, the impedance curve, which is changing. What we do is we have a very dynamic but very linear power amp, and then we pre-voice that with a very powerful digital block. So basically, what it allows you to do is get all the dynamics of a valve amp as well as the frequency bit, because the frequency bit has been done for years. So the bit about, there was something called current feedback, which the guys I know, Valve State, Marshall Valve State was a good example of that sort of product. And it gave you that filter, the filter. So you still got that bottom end, that presence. But right up until TVP, there was nothing that gave you the different power delivery at different frequencies. And that's the thing we've got the patent for. And that's why when you're playing that stuff and you back off and you dig in, you're getting that real dynamic response.
You're allowed to talk with authority about Marshall Valve State as well, aren't you?
A little bit more on AVT than valve state because
the next one.
But although Bruce, our technical director, I believe he actually developed, because the valve state bit isn't the preamp valve, it's the power amp, and it's this current feedback thing.
I just have fond memories back in the late 80s, early 90s, again, of just selling hundreds of those things.
Yeah, they were very popular. 80s.
If you're not familiar with Blackstar's sort of heritage, there was a core of Marshall employees that felt they could do something different.
So actually, funnily enough, the guy who invented the valve state power amp bit, Bruce Keir, is the guy who invented TVP.
Oh, cool.
So it's the same guy, and that's the whole thing. It's our analog engineers who can also do the digital stuff.
But so in essence, the vibe here with this is that when you see a Silverline amplifier, and perhaps the model number infers 20 watts or 60 watts or whatever, it's enough power delivered through that Class D power amplifier to replicate the power that you would get with a 20 or a 60 or whatever valve amplifier.
Essentially, that's the deal.
So it's absolutely, don't sort of get confused with kind of thinking, someone always told me that, like a 50 watt valve amplifier was equivalent to a 200 watt solid state amplifier. That's probably true, but in these, the model number is designed to give you a similar.
Mate, this is why we
volume.
haven't actually put the wattages on them, because it got confusing the other way. And now, so what we're doing is we say we've got the standard, we've got the special, we've got the deluxe, and it's more about inferring what the usage is. So you've got a 1x10, the standard, which is the 1x10, then you've got the special, which is a 1x12, and then you've got the bigger ones like the deluxe, which have more features. It's the name that infers their usage rather than the power rating, which some people do it one way, some people do it the other way. This is more, I suppose, a Fendery way of doing it.
Well, look, I think now is probably as good a time as any to invite Alex to come on, and I'm going to grab my GoPro. I'm probably going to jump behind one. Alex might do a bit of playing, whatever, and take you through some of the sounds. But thank you very much for coming down, as always.
Cheers, pal.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
Good luck with these. Right, stay tuned. Welcome back. So I'm going to grab my GoPro, jump behind an amplifier, and hopefully Alex is going to tell us a little bit about each model and give us some sounds as well. So I'm standing behind the biggest one in the range, which is the 212 stereo one, and this has a slightly different panel to the two smaller ones, but I'll go through that in a second. That opening jam that I did, by the way, this is the settings it was on. I didn't have any pedals plugged in apart from my looper pedal. So as you can see, a little bit like True Valve Power, if you're familiar with that, the first thing that you have to decide on here, is kind of what basic preamp tone that you're getting. So can you give us any info? Are these based on famous amps, or are they just your own?
Again, like Ian said, we design this amp as we would design any of our amps. So, from the ground up, we design the preamps.
Cool. So we're going to start here on warm clean, and what I will do as we go up through the different voices, I'll change the responses as well to something perhaps a little bit more appropriate, and I'll probably leave all the EQ on 12 o'clock and just a little bit of reverb like we got now, maybe a bit less reverb actually. Okay, so warm clean with a 6L6 response. Then we've got clean, bright, which for the time being I will leave on the 6L6 response. Crunch, but I will now change to an EL84. Super crunch, which I will change to a EL34. OD1, and we'll do that on KT66s just because we can. And finally, the heaviest one, Overdrive 2, which I'll put on KT88s. Oh, me likey. Okay, so we'll just pop it back on its clean setting to show you what some of the other features do, because it's easier that way. Bass, middle and treble controls, don't really need to demo those. ISF you probably should be familiar with now, because it's a feature Blackstar have had for 10 or 11 years now. But it's a frequency shaping thing. So originally I remember it was marketed as kind of going from a very classic American sounding voice amp around to a sort of more classic British sounding voice amp. So if whilst you're strumming, if I adjust it, you'll hear. So kind of scooped and bright at one end and more mid-rangey and chimey at the other. The effects section, very simple to use. You've got a selection of reverbs, delays and modulations. All three can be used at once if you want them to be. You just turn them on and off by hitting these buttons. If it's lit up orange, that's the one that's being controlled by the effects dial here. And if it's white, it just means it's on. And if it's not on, then it's not on. Pretty intuitive. And as Ian was saying over here, the resonance and presence controls and the volume over at the end. We'll do a pan of some of the ins and outs on the back. The cool thing now, unlike the previous model, I believe, is there is effects loop capability on these.
Yes.
But we'll talk about that as well in a minute. Can I find one of the amps with the small, in fact, I'll show the smaller amp. So if you end up with one of the smaller ones, which would be either the standard or the special, giving you either the sort of the 20 and the 50 watt equivalents, you get a slightly cut down panel. You've still got the same selection of voices. You've got a slightly smaller EQ, so no mid control on the EQ. You've still got the effects as well, but you lose the resonance and presence controls. But kind of all the main important stuff is still there. And when we jam out at the end, we'll use one of those as well. So you're the digital guy, is that fair to say?
One of them, yes.
One of them.
Yeah.
What does building an amp digitally even mean?
Yeah. So my background is a sound engineer, so I don't know too much about the ones and zeros part of you, but I use all the digital blocks that our DSP engineers make. So we make everything in-house. And I kind of design the way these sound. So.
Oh, so there's like a two-stage.
Yeah.
So you've got the like the ones and zeros bit, as you said, is designed to create the component blocks of an amplifier.
Yeah.
But break them down into something more intuitive. So you're almost building an amp more conventionally, almost, and voicing it, but choosing digital blocks rather than
instead of picking
actual
up
analog components. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Is there something, because you presumably were involved with True Valve Power as well as Silverline.
Yes. Yeah.
So what would you say then from your input? What have you done specifically to kind of move that product on up a level?
So when we did the TVP stuff back in the day, how many years ago was that? 10 years ago now?
Is it really 10 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Fair enough.
That was the first project that I was kind of involved with.
Cool.
It wasn't the voicing part of it, but that's where I started in the company. So one of the biggest things is we changed the speaker. We went for the Celestion V-type across the range and the V-type Junior, which I think is fairly new, in 4 ohms that are kind of custom for us. With a much higher spec speaker, we had to revoice everything from the power amp, the TVP section, back to the preamp. So that was a big job to go through all that kind of stuff and redo everything, make sure everything was in there for a reason. Is another thing that we do. The other big thing, the big change or the big advancement on this is the analog front end. So we worked a lot on that. If the analog front end is no good in a digital amp, then it's not gonna feel like any of your valve amps that you plug into. So did a lot of work on the noise reduction, much less noisy analog front end.
The noise reduction was the first thing that I kind of noticed when I think, lots of digital processors have that kind of, there's an immediacy around it which feels exciting and familiar, but there's that kind of, that 2 or 3 seconds later when you start to go, where's my tone going? Or like, sometimes it's not even audible. It is a feel thing. But again, you made some tweaks to this when you've obviously got multiple settings for that. So you've got very high threshold noise gates, great for super high gain, tight sounds. But I wanted, almost as little as possible. Yeah. And as soon as you did that, I felt like, all of a sudden
everything comes alive.
Yeah, it comes alive, and that sparkle there. I really liked it. Now, the editor that you guys use for Blackstar, which is a free editor, you USB connect these up to your computer, that seems to open up even more functionality. So you've got obviously a chunk of the functionality of the amplifier that you can use, and I guess a lot of people will never go anywhere near inside it, right?
Yeah, I think that's almost the point of these amps. Like Ian said, you just want to be able to plug in and go. You don't want to look at screens. You don't need to plug it into the computer if you don't need to.
But if that's your thing, if you're quite comfortable doing that, what other options does it bring out?
It opens up the small ones, the standard and the special, a lot more. So on the panel, you don't have a mid control or resonance and presence. You can access all that from the front panel if you really want to by holding down tab and turning on the controls. So you don't need to plug it into the PC or Mac. But you get all your controls up there, you can save your patches, you can store stuff, you can download stuff from online from artists and stuff. So.
Oh, okay, so there's like a cloud community thing. And that's cool.
Plus you get if you want to use it for the audio interface side, then you get a full 2-channel USB audio interface with it.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to do was run my looper through the effects loop on this, and that was another sort of dual functionality thing. So what's the sort of out-the-box functionality of the panel on the back?
So we get a line input if you don't want to just plug your iPhone in or something while you're practicing, and a headphone output. With Insider, you can click a button and turn that into effects send and return. Right.
So you've got to decide that you're cool to lose the headphone and the auxiliary input thing, which I think is fine, isn't it? But you then get an effects loop, which is super cool.
Yeah.
On the optional foot switch with these as well, which we shall have on screen now, it's the same foot switch from the previous range, right? The FS10, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah. And does that give you the functionality to recall patches and turn on and off effects, or what can you do with that?
Yeah, and that's that can be plugged in across all the amps on the range. Plus the deluxe models and the stereo deluxe, you can use MIDI as well. And we might have a new MIDI foot controller coming out soon too.
Are we leaving that in? We're leaving that in, are we? Okay, you heard it here first. Possibly not the most exciting news of the year, but hey, might be for Blackstar. A new MIDI foot controller coming. All right, well look, we might as well just jam out on these, because I think my favourite thing about these kind of higher end sort of digital amplifiers is, as long as I can I'm quite happy plugging into almost anything, as long as I don't have that sense that it's not a valve amplifier. As soon as I have the sense that it's not a valve amplifier, and sometimes that can be an audible trigger, like if I hear something that's not right, but also as well, sometimes it's just a visual trigger for me. So if I'm plugged into a multi-effects floorboard, it's like, even that might sound amazing like that, as soon as my eyes go, it's not a real amplifier, something, little gremlin in my brain goes, you won't play as good now. But I like the fact that these kind of look cool. They look like a conventional amplifier.
Exactly. Yeah.
I even like the fact that you've done the, I don't know if I can show you this, but I like amplifiers that are wider at the bottom than they are at the top. It's kind of real old Fender thing, isn't it? I like the fact that you started doing that on all these models. it's a cool thing. Price-wise, I think the range varies anything from about £350 up to about £750, and the links are in the description below if you want to go and find out more. So as I said it right at the beginning to Ian, it kind of sits in that at that price where you absolutely could decide that you might want a little 20 watt valve amplifier or a 10 watt valve amplifier instead. You might even want a 10 or a 20 watt Blackstar valve amplifier. So I think it's important that you kind of just look at this and go, what do I want to do? You know, do I want a completely clean amplifier with 2 or 3 knobs and I'm going to put my own pedals on it and stuff like that, in which case you might go down the valve route, or you might want something that's can do a bit of everything and, you know, record via USB or whatever, and then Silverline becomes a viable option. Anyway, let's thank you very much for joining us today.
No worries.
Let's see if we can just get some tones.